snap. The kick is in the air, and the kick this time is no, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. Final score, Tennessee 20, Florida 17. Pandemonium reigns.
You're listening to the RTI Podcast, powered by RockyTopInsider.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI Podcast. I'm Nathaniel Rutherford, managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, joined, as always, by Ben McKee, our staff writer and the producer and co-host of the Swing Event morning radio show. We appreciate all of you tuning in to this episode. It's the second one of the week. We're going to be giving you a good deep look into BYU. Ben actually will have a piece on the website on RockyTopInsider.com as a full preview of the Cougars' offense, defense, everything you're going to want to know. So we'll try not to go beat for beat on that one. We're going to give kind of a little bit of a different take on this, not just tell you, hey, this is what's on offense, hey, this is on defense. We're going to talk about certain matchups we're definitely going to be watching for, things that concern us, things where we think maybe Tennessee has an advantage in this game. But first, Ben, I want to talk about, kind of rehashing just a little bit of what happened over the weekend and how it pertains to this upcoming weekend's game. We had, I think, a question in the mailbag this week on RockyTopInsider.com asking us, is this the most important game of, I think if they said of Tennessee football, period? And I said, well, no, I think it's a little hyperbole. But I'm under the impression, Ben, that this is absolutely now, because of the way you lost last week, especially, not just that you lost. If Tennessee had lost in kind of a fluky way, it would be a little more forgivable. It would still be, in my opinion, an unexplainable loss, one that you should not have. But Tennessee didn't lose in a fluky way. I mean, Georgia State, we've talked about it I don't know how many times on the shows and podcasts, Ben, but they pretty much dominated Tennessee in every aspect of the game, just about. I think that makes this weekend's game against BYU, it is undoubtedly, in my opinion, the most important game of the season. I mean, I guess you could maybe argue Florida or some other SEC game because it's an SEC game and that's always going to be more important. But I think just from the fact of, is this going to serve as a turning point? Is this going to be the catalyst, the one where Tennessee comes together and it galvanizes the team and they realize, hey, we cannot let what happened over the weekend happen again, like what Juwan Jennings said to the media this week. And actually, Pruitt hasn't come out and really said that, but he's hinted as much about, hey, we need to get things right. Other players have said the same thing of, hey, this can't happen again. Ben, I absolutely think this is the most important game on the schedule in 2019, but I also think it's we talked a little bit about this, me and the Vol Recruiting Reports guys over in the RTI and VR2 recruiting podcast earlier this week, but I think this is actually vitally important for Tennessee's future of football, because if you go out and you start at 0-2 in a season where a lot of people, a lot of Vol fans and a lot of experts, a lot of national, local, just a bunch of people had Tennessee penciled in as a 2-0 start to the season. If you start at 0-2, I don't know how that isn't resonating a sour note with recruits and for the future of the program and looking at how the recruits look at what Pruitt's doing at Tennessee and how fans look at what Pruitt's doing at Tennessee. I just think this is, in my opinion, undoubtedly the most important game of the season. I'd imagine. I'm not going to speak for you, Ben. I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on it on this weekend's matchup before we get into some of the finer minutiae of the game?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely the most important game right now because, as cliche as it sounds, I mean, it's the next game on the schedule, and the reason it is so important is because Tennessee lost to Georgia State in embarrassing fashion on Saturday. So, for obvious reasons, I mean, it most definitely is the most important game on Tennessee's schedule because if Tennessee doesn't win this game, I'm of the belief they start 1-7. You could say 1-6, most definitely. I'm willing to go 1-7 because South Carolina follows Alabama, and I don't think Tennessee's a better team than South Carolina. I think South Carolina's front seven will eat Tennessee's front offensive front alive. So you have to win this game to make up for last week. I mean, you lose one that you're not supposed to, and now you got to win one that you're not supposed to. And personally, I think at least going into the season, I thought every game but Vanderbilt and Kentucky, and then obviously Georgia State, UAB, and ETSU. Those were the 5 games that I thought were where Tennessee was better than those teams, whereas on paper, I thought BYU was a better team than Tennessee going into the season. I thought that Mississippi State, South Carolina, Missouri, those teams in addition to Florida, Georgia, Alabama, I thought those teams were better than Tennessee on paper. Obviously, games aren't played on paper. You play the game on the football field for a reason. So I say that to say that Tennessee's got to make it up and win one of the games that they aren't supposed to. And BYU is one of those games, in my opinion, simply because I think BYU is a better football team than Tennessee. Traditionally, Tennessee should beat BYU every single year. But as we have learned the past 3 years, Tennessee is not what it used to be. So you can't just roll your helmet out there and expect to beat BYU, as we saw Tennessee try to do that with Georgia State, and they got bit in the butt. So this is a game that Tennessee has to have for recruiting purposes, like you illustrated, to get the fans back on board. I mentioned it on Tuesday, I believe it was. Tennessee is in the area where they are starting to lose the diehard football fans, the diehard Tennessee football fans, and that's when you're in big trouble. So they need this game to get those fans back on board. They need this game if they want to have any chance of landing Darnell Washington or Raheem Jarrett or any of those big-time recruits like Eric Gilbert. They have to do it. There's been a lot of bickering on social media amongst fans. A win would help that out big time. There's been a lot of drama over with the football team. A win would help that a lot as well. So I absolutely think it's a must-win. But I say all that stuff, but the main reason I think it is a must-win game is because if they don't win, I will be convinced that they start 1-7. Because if they don't win, that means that last Saturday was not a fluke. If they don't win, they didn't come out with the proper effort, or they're just simply not a good football team. So we're going to learn a lot about this football team on Saturday. We're going to learn that either Georgia State was somewhat of a fluke, and maybe Tennessee can beat Florida coming up, maybe can beat South Carolina, maybe Mississippi State. But, again, if they lose this game, I will be 100% convinced that Tennessee starts 1-7, because if you lose to Georgia State the way you did, you lose to BYU, who is not as good as Mississippi State, South Carolina, or Florida, then I absolutely expect Tennessee to lose those games. So you have to win this game simply just so you don't start 1-7. It's quite simple as that.
Yeah, I think 1-7 is definitely possible. 1-6 is absolutely, in my opinion, very likely if this happens. One more talking point before we really move into looking really at the game in greater detail. Ben, we heard Pruitt say, I believe it was on Wednesday and maybe Monday both, where he talked about, heading into the week, maybe even said after Saturday's game, right afterwards, that, it wasn't like the team had come out in practices and looked bad. He said, we've had good practices all during fall camp. We even had good practices, leading up to the Georgia State game. You've been in practice this week. I know media obviously doesn't get to see a whole lot, but I did hear Jason Swain on the Swain event talk on Thursday morning. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon, so I'm not sure when all of y'all are listening to it or not. But on Thursday morning, Swain said he was at practice, and he's a former player. He gets to stay for the whole time, whereas us as media get to stay for maybe 10 minutes usually. But he said he liked what he saw. He liked the attitude. He liked what they're doing. He said it was very, very hot in Knoxville too on Wednesday when they were at practice. So he said they had a very good practice. And that seems to have encouraged him a little bit, and probably encouraged a lot of fans who've heard that. Bennett, it didn't encourage me anymore, because I think maybe my faith in this team has already just been shot at this point. And faith, the definition of faith is believing without seeing. I'm just gonna have to. I'm not gonna believe it until I see it with this team, because as Pruitt said, they have had good practices. It wasn't like they had a bunch of bad practices and a bunch of just bad stuff. To me, you look at some of the good news that's happened this week, where obviously Jordan Murphy's no longer part of the team, and I think, Ben, you and I would both agree that's best for everyone involved. It's best for Jordan Murphy to go ahead and leave. It's best for Tennessee to not have him on the roster anymore. I don't know anything about Terrell Bailey's situation, but I mean, he wasn't playing it. It didn't seem like he's happy about it, so good for him to go, try to find somewhere else. Malik Gray also transferred a couple weeks ago. I think, those are all good things. It's good to kind of, hopefully get your locker room right. But where Tennessee struggled the most on Saturday over the weekend, it wasn't with the receivers. It wasn't with the cornerbacks. It wasn't the two positions that Bailey and Gray and Murphy played. It was in the trenches, and I just don't know. I don't know that Tennessee's gotten any better or any worse in the trenches over the course of this week in practice. I don't want to give away too much about our picks and stuff because Ben and I will have them on RTITopInsider.com on Friday, our actual game score predictions and things like that for the BYU game. But Ben, to me, the biggest concern to me was it wouldn't be effort, because I think effort won't be as big of an issue this weekend as it was over the past weekend. I do think that Juwan Jennings and Daniel Batuli and Trey Smith and these other guys who are leaders on the team, Nigel Warrior, they're going to get this team fired up, and I think they're going to get them, to show more effort consistently on the field. But Pruitt said it, and I actually do agree with him with this. I don't agree with the fact that he has kind of brushed aside the fact that effort wasn't an issue. He said multiple times it wasn't an issue. I absolutely think it was an issue, but I do agree with him with this. I think execution was still the biggest problem. I think that trumped anything else that happened with effort, energy, or anything like that. I think execution was the biggest issue, and I just don't know. I don't know that Tennessee is going to make enough strides in practice this week to make execution on the offensive line or on the defensive line any better, because we got asked this in mailbag too, Ben, but Pruitt has asked whether or not Tennessee is going to keep rotating offensive linemen in and out. Pruitt essentially said that they're going to. To me, I don't think that's a great practice. Obviously, I'm not a coach of football. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm stupid in this regard. Maybe I imagine Pruitt and Wilfred and Jim Chaney obviously know a lot more about football than I do, but it just doesn't seem like that's a big recipe for success. But on the flip side, it wasn't like Tennessee had 5 guys on the offensive line assert themselves as need to start guys. I think all my point in saying this, Ben, is has anything that's happened this week from a Tennessee perspective, has it really given you any more confidence than you had at the beginning of the week that Tennessee can beat BYU? Because I know you and I both, definitely after the Georgia State game and also earlier this week when we did the first podcast of the week, you and I both were not feeling very good about the game this upcoming weekend. I'm curious if anything this week has given you any more confidence, because I think on the surface initially when I had seen and heard things of whether it was what Juwan Jennings said or the practice is going well, I think my gut reaction at first was to say, hey, that's good news. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, does it really actually matter? So I'm curious if anything that you've heard or seen this past week, Ben, has given you any more or less confidence in Tennessee's ability to win this weekend.
Nope, not at all. It's actually giving me less confidence. I know Swain. Obviously, I know what Swain said on the radio this morning. I was sitting right next to him when he said it, and he told me the same thing before the show started. But from what I saw at practice, I didn't see a different football team. I saw the same football team we saw all fall camp, and that was a football team that piled dead practice after dead practice after dead practice, back to back to back. And when I say dead practice, I'm talking about the practice wasn't juiced. There wasn't a whole lot of energy. Guys weren't really talking. That was the same practice. The same practice I saw on Wednesday and Tuesday of this week was the same practice I saw all fall camp. I did not notice a single difference. The only difference was players being moved, like Aaron Beasley and Gerard Means, Jordan Murphy not being there. That was the only difference in practice this week. The only one. And I saw a different portion of practice than Swain did. And as Swain said on the show this morning, the individual periods in which they were working with their units are much harder than the team periods, which is what Swain saw. So Swain saw a different portion of practice. He saw the last 20 minutes or so of practice. I saw the first 7 minutes technically. In the 7 minutes that I saw, it was the same exact practice I had seen all of fall camp. Again, just no juice. It was dead out there. The only person chirping was Tracy Rocker, who was out of his mind mad, and then Will Friend and Jim Chaney, as they have been the last couple of weeks, and that was really it. That was it. And Brian Niedermeyer, who was always amped up. It was really just the coaches, and that's what I heard or saw, and I guess technically heard, although I didn't really hear anything, if that makes sense. It was the same thing. It was the same thing. It's just not the juice needed, in my opinion. So that worries me for Saturday, that the team didn't really learn its lesson. And part of me thinks that it's because they are so young that the young players like Henry To'oTo'o,
Right.
Now, I will say Henry To'oTo'o was kind of vocal, but he wasn't vocal in terms of encouraging his teammates, and not in like a bad teammate sort of way, but he was like constantly asking Kevin Shearer questions about like where to line up and things like that. So he was talking and very into practice. It's just he wasn't, Juwan Jennings out there trying to hype everybody up. So I think that's part of why practice has been dead, in my opinion, is because there are so many young guys in crucial positions that during practice, because they're swimming in the deep end right now, they don't really know how to lock in on during practice and also kind of be juiced up, because they have to spend so much effort in listening to the coaches and making sure they know what to do, that they don't have time to be the Juwan Jennings. So I think that's part of it. And also, I'm not going to go in a long dialogue right now about it, but earlier in the week, I think it was Wednesday, yesterday's show, I said that the reason I think leadership is a problem is because outside of, some of the young guys who aren't leaders yet, but probably will be one day, is that you don't really have any natural leaders on this football team. You have guys who are veterans who are being forced to be leaders because they are simply veterans. The guys that you see constantly talked about as leaders, they aren't natural leaders. It's not natural for them to lead, and they're being forced into this role. So that's kind of why I think practice has been dead, is because they don't have natural leaders, and they have a bunch of freshmen in key places that are trying to learn what to do, or they are drinking water out of a fire hydrant, out of a fire hose. So they just don't have time to be amped up, if that makes sense, just because they're swimming in the deep end. So for that reason, I feel less confident in Tennessee's ability to beat BYU. And then on top of that, you mentioned it, but Pruitt hasn't really showed me any, fire this week. I mean, he had the comment last night during Vols calls talking about, there might be some more players on the way out the door if they don't get it together. They're either with us or they're not, and they can go on somewhere. And he didn't say that word for word. I'm paraphrasing, but he had said something along those lines. And outside of that quote from Pruitt, I mean, he didn't really come out against the effort. He said the coaches made good, or he was happy with the in-game adjustments that the coaches made, and that he thought some of the offensive line played good. He said that the offensive line didn't allow a pressure or a sack in the first 55 snaps of the game, which is not true. If it is true, his definition of a quarterback pressure is 1,000 times different than my definition of a quarterback pressure. So it's just like, it's almost as if Tennessee didn't lose to Georgia State. Like that's how it has felt. I thought a different Pruitt would come out. So based off of practice, based off of Pruitt's, to me, I'm not going to say he doesn't care, because obviously he cares, but it's just he hasn't been fiery this week, and I don't understand. He hasn't really come out and, really said that, yes, the effort was lacking, and yes, we made poor coaching decisions. I mean, he's said that some of the coaching decisions were on him, but the fact that he said the in-game adjustments, he was happy with them, that was mind-blowing to me. And the fact that he said he had some players on both sides of the ball on defense play well, that was kind of mind-boggling to me. So I did not understand what Pruitt was trying to get across and convey this week through the media. It was kind of mind-boggling to me. So for those reasons, honestly, I feel less confident about Saturday's game.
The exact quote you were referencing earlier about what Pruitt said on the calls, I've got it pulled up in front of me here. Quote, "It's like I told the kids today, when things don't go your way, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to put on more steam, right? We probably got a few of them, I guess talking about players, got a few of the players that might not be with us. Some of them's done left. There might be a few more, but that's okay. They need to get out of our way because we've got a bunch of them over there that are heading in the right direction." And like you said, that was a pretty strong statement. I thought he actually made Pruitt on the Vol calls made a couple of strong statements about the team. He talked about, someone else, one of the other callers asked him if there's anybody else on the team like Juwan Jennings that has that kind of fire and passion and stuff. And he said, yeah, we have a lot of guys that are mature, that understand the importance, that Tennessee means a lot to them. And then we also have a lot of guys that are just figuring it out. It's a process. I mean, that to me is a clear cut, calling, not calling anyone out specifically by name, but calling definitely some people out saying, hey, they're still figuring this thing out. That could obviously mean, maybe some freshmen or some new guys who are new to the program, but I imagine he's definitely not talking about just the new guys there. He also had a comment about the defense, Ben, that I think you and I would 100% agree with. I know I did, and I think maybe it's also, you look at Daniel Batuli wasn't out on the field on defense, and maybe that's part of it. But he was asked if when Tennessee lines up on defense, does Tennessee have anybody that other opponents look at and that they're scared of? And Pruitt's response, it made me do a double take and also laugh out loud because it was just such a blunt, just no response. He said, I would say absolutely none of them. I've coached a few that when the ball was turned over, when they came out of the tunnel, you could see other team looking down there and saying, hey, there's so-and-so. It's based off what you put on tape, right? So I don't know that anybody that played Saturday that's going to have the other team scared of them. And that was, he made some pretty, blunt and pretty strong statements on Vol calls, but he didn't, like you said, Ben, he didn't in front of the media and other controlled media sessions on really after the game Saturday, on Monday or on Wednesday. So I'm curious why he was as different as he was on Vol calls, or if that was just, I don't know. Whatever it was, I'm with you. I haven't seen a whole lot or heard a whole lot this past week that's given me a lot more confidence. And I'm not trying to sit here and Ben and I aren't trying to sit here and just be doom and gloom and negavols or whatever. We try to shoot it straight. We don't try to sugarcoat things. We don't try to be negative all the time either. We don't try to be super positive and super negative. We just try to tell you how we feel. And right now, the feeling around Tennessee football is not great. I don't, I wouldn't fault anybody for feeling a little more optimistic. I wouldn't fault anybody for feeling more pessimistic. I think either one's a rational reaction based off just different stuff that's happened this week and how things have gone, how things went on Saturday. I think it would help if Tennessee does get Daniel Batuli back for the game, and that even if he can play just 25, 30 snaps like what Trey Smith did, that will help the defense. But it should help him get lined up more frequently because that was a big issue, and I think obviously he can help with that, being kind of the quarterback of the defense at the inside linebacker spot. But Ben, to transition a little bit, there's a lot of different things I wanted to bring up and talk about, but it would feel like we're just talking about this past Saturday again, so I kind of want to move on a little bit since we do have another game to talk about this upcoming weekend against BYU. Without getting too much into detail of going into detail of your team preview or opponent preview, of the Cougars, I am intrigued by the Cougars very well. You've been pretty high on them even before the season started, but now that we've gotten to watch them play Utah and you've been able to kind of dig a little bit deeper in the team for the opponent preview, what is the one main matchup? Because I imagine there are a couple different matchups that concern you probably from a Tennessee perspective, but what is the one main matchup, Ben, that you look at on paper and you say this could spell a lot of trouble for Tennessee on Saturday?
It's BYU's offensive line. I think they are Gosh, I really sound like a negavol, and I apologize because I hate doing it. But it's just like if you can take your orange-colored glasses off and look at the game on paper, in my opinion, it does not favor Tennessee because BYU is strongest where Tennessee is the weakest, and that's along the line of scrimmage. They are led by their left tackle, their center, and their right guard. Their left tackle, Brady Christensen, he's a sophomore. As a freshman last year, he played and started in all 13 games. He was ranked the second best freshman offensive tackle in all of college football by Pro Football Focus, and he was nominated as a freshman All-American candidate. And he's not even the best lineman along the offensive line. The best lineman is their center, James Impey, who is a sophomore, a redshirt sophomore. He was named a freshman All-American last year by the Football Writers Association of America, and then by Pro Football Focus. I already told you their left tackle was the best the second best freshman offensive tackle in all of college football, according to Pro Football Focus. Well, their center was the best freshman center in all of college football last year, according to Pro Football Focus. He played and started in all 13 games as well. He's smart, he's physical, and as a sophomore, he's already a leader of the football team. And then the right guard I mentioned, Tristan Hogue, he sat out in 2017 after transferring from Notre Dame, 6'5", 310 pounds, started all 13 games last year. He's a junior. He's on the NFL's radar after a good sophomore season. They're just so good up front, and BYU usually has one of the oldest offensive lines in football, and in this year they returned six of their top guys who combined for 52 career starts, or 52 starts in general just last season, and then for their career they have a combined 74 career starts. So it's an experienced offensive line, although their classification may not say so because, again, Christensen and Impey is a sophomore, but they played a lot of games to this point in their career. They've been playing since they could possibly play. Christensen played as a true freshman. Impey played as a redshirt freshman. So although it says sophomores, they played a lot of football. Tristan Hogue is a transfer from Notre Dame. He's a junior. He's played a lot of football. Their left guard, Kiefer Longson, he is 6'7", 317 pounds. Started in 3 games last year, played in 8. He's nothing but beef. The right tackle, he's a redshirt freshman, but 6'6", 306 pounds in Harris LaChance. I mean, they're just big bodies who get the job done. They're physical. They're mentally tough. They are smart. And they're going up against a Tennessee defensive line that has no proven playmakers, including Arbor Solomon. Arbor Solomon has not done anything. He started a couple of games at Michigan, and outside of that, the only thing to his resume is that he was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. But once you arrive on a college campus, nobody cares about your high school ranking. So BYU's physical, talented offensive line, and they're also very smart, as I mentioned, is going up against a Tennessee defensive line that has no real playmakers, doesn't have a lot of experience, and doesn't know how to line up correctly. I think that is the making of a terrible matchup. And then to compound the issue, they're blocking for a quarterback in Zach Wilson, who he had 2 interceptions, 2 pick sixes last week against Utah, didn't perform the best, only threw for like 222 yards, I believe it was. I got the stats right here. He was 21 of 33, 208 yards, 2 interceptions. Not great stats. I'm of the belief that had more to do with Utah's potential playoff level defense that they have, and he just struggled against a really good defense, and he is much better than he played. So behind a really good offensive line, he is 10 times better than the Georgia State quarterback, Dan Ellington, that ran all over Tennessee. He can run. He can throw the football. All you got to do is look at his stats from last year. He was the youngest freshman quarterback to ever start at BYU. Did not start the first 6 games of the year. Started the last 7 games, and BYU's offense was much stronger in those 7 games that he started. 11.3 more points, 77 more rushing yards, 109 more total yards, and 10.8 points per game more because of 1.8 more touchdowns per game. So BYU's offense was significantly better with him playing. He was 18 of 18 in the bowl game against Western Michigan, and I get that it was Western Michigan, but 18 of 18 in college football is remarkable. So Zach Wilson behind their offensive line, in my mind, is not a great problem for Tennessee. I think that presents a lot of problems. And then you throw in the tight end, Matt Bushman. He's just a matchup nightmare for Tennessee's linebackers. So it starts with the offensive line. That is the matchup that I truly do not like for Tennessee. And then it just it has an effect on everybody else, and it just kind of grows from there like a tree. So it starts with the offensive line for me.
On the flip side, let's give it. You said you didn't want to sound like a negaval. Let's give you a chance to sound a little more positive about Tennessee. On the flip side of this, Ben, where's the one area you look at for Tennessee and say, hey, this is an area where they could cause a lot of problems for BYU?
Wide receivers going up against BYU secondary. I think Marquez Callaway, Josh Palmer, and Jawan Jennings have the potential to have a really big football game. But unfortunately for the 3 wide receivers, it all depends on what the offensive line does for Tennessee. If the offensive line can give Jarrett Garantano enough time to sit back and get the ball downfield, I like Tennessee's chances in this football game. The only problem is I don't have a lot of faith in Tennessee's offensive line to do that. So I think you'll see a lot of 2 tight end sets where Dominic Wood-Anderson and Austin Pope are kind of offset behind the tackles like they were in the Auburn game last year, giving JG that extra split second to push the ball downfield to the playmakers in Callaway. I mentioned all 3 of the big receivers. I need to include Dominic Wood-Anderson. I think Dominic Wood-Anderson could really have a big-time football game. Eric Gray in the passing game. So Tennessee's potential passing attack, if the offensive line gives JG some time, I think could really do some damage to an inexperienced BYU secondary. It has some depth, but it's not great depth at corner. And in my opinion, the strongest area of Tennessee's football team is its receivers. On BYU's defense, I don't know that it's like a true weakness, but if we had to pick the weakest point on the team, it would probably be the depth at corner. So I think Tennessee's receivers have a great chance to have a big game if that offensive line can give JG some time. And I'm still a believer in JG. Like, his game was not the best on Saturday against Georgia State, but he also was good enough to a certain extent to win the football game. If Tennessee's defense doesn't have a terrible day, Tennessee wins that football game. And from what I heard, when going back and looking at the film, the coaching staff was actually happier with the way JG performed than they initially thought, because there were some times where somebody appeared open, but he wasn't actually open because there was another safety coming into the zone. On one play, Dominic Wood-Anderson was wide open, but the referee was standing right in front of DWA, and if JG throws that pass, he either throws it short and it hits the ref right in the face, or he throws it, or he tries to lead DWA and it's picked off. So there are some instances like that. So I say that to say I'm a believer in JG. I think he can go out there and with the receivers can win this game on his arm, on the receivers' abilities to make plays like they did in the Auburn game. But it all goes back to the offensive line. If the offensive line can have an average day, just an average day, I think Tennessee can win the football game.
I think that's to me, the offensive line to have an average day would be something we haven't seen, I guess, since maybe the Kentucky game last year, but maybe even push it back to I think they had a decent game against South Carolina. I mean, that was a game where Tennessee's offense was not the issue. Last year it was the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed in that game. I just look at this game this weekend, Ben, and there's so many questions I have that I guess will be answered, and maybe won't be answered. Maybe they won't be answered till Florida. But there are just a lot of things that Tennessee has to account for, has to atone for in this game, and I'm just very curious to see, as you mentioned there, how Tennessee's how Tennessee's defensive line can hold up, and how their offensive line can. Because it's, to me, I look at statistically speaking, BYU's front seven didn't do a very great job against Utah. Obviously, Utah is a ranked team; they're much better than Tennessee. They ran their leading rusher ran for almost 200 yards by himself. I think 187 that Moss did for Utah, and they didn't throw the ball a ton. I think they only attempted 16 passes on the day. BYU did not get a single sack against the Utes, and like I said, and they gave up quite a bit on the ground. I am going to be very curious to see what happens there with that front seven, because I don't know that they're definitely not as good as any of the SEC teams Tennessee's going to face, but I think both teams' front sevens are going to have an interesting challenge ahead of them, because, as you said, I do think BYU's offensive line is their biggest strength. Literally, they're strong and they're big, and they're just a very good offensive line. Then to kind of project ahead a little bit, we obviously haven't put in our picks yet for this game, and I think a lot of fans probably can tell a little which way we're leaning at this point. And I just hate to say it, I don't feel great about Tennessee's chances over the weekend. But this weekend, and then moving forward, too, I guess this is kind of a two-part question. Do you expect to see Tennessee against BYU play a lot more younger players? And we obviously already saw Henry To'oTo'o and Warren Burrell play a lot. Burrell play a lot over the past weekend against Georgia State. Those two guys played a lot. Obviously, Wanya Morris got the start. And then you also had Darnell Wright play quite a bit, and Pruitt, mentioned him out specifically by name on Monday's press conference, or I think it was Monday's press conference of some guys he thought after he went back and watched the film. I think he singled out 3 offensive linemen, and one of them was Darnell, as guys that perform very well or perform better. They're, I guess, kind of the 3 best performing offensive linemen from the game. But we didn't see, we saw a little bit of Quavaris Crouch. We saw a little bit of Jeremy Banks. He's a sophomore, so I'm kind of sophomores or second-year players in here too. And obviously, Jameer Johnson he's a second-year player, but he's older. Then you had a couple other guys there. I mean, Karot Garland's a second-year guy who got a decent amount of playing time. There were several who played a decent amount. But I'm curious, Ben, do you think we see even more snaps given to younger guys in this game than we did last weekend? Because of some of the effort and some of the issues that some of the older guys did. I think maybe that was put him out into the game and saying, at least seeing what he has from his veterans and seeing what he has from the older guys. I'm going to be very curious to see if we don't see more snaps for Quavaris Crouch, if we don't see maybe some more snaps for Roman Harrison, maybe not Jalen McCullough. He's not very high on the depth chart right now, but maybe if they see a Tyus Fields get in there possibly a little bit more, or I know Trevon Flowers didn't look as good as I hoped he was going to in the first week, but I'm very curious to see, do we see some more young guys get playing time at certain positions? Do we see Aaron Beasley get some snaps at running back, because we don't know if Tim Jordan's going to play or not, so do we see Aaron Beasley there? I think, Ben, we will see more young guys, whether it's first or second year guys, playing on Saturday. And then I think if Tennessee loses this game on Saturday, I think at that point you've got to start playing your young guys and just saying to hell with it. This season's already, it feels like it's, I don't think the coaching staff's obviously going to give up on the season, but at that point, if you're 0-2 and you're about to face the SEC schedule after UTC, I think you just start playing younger guys and seeing how they play. But that's a different conversation to have. But I'm curious, do you think we'll see a significant uptick in playing time from some of Tennessee's, freshmen, redshirt freshmen, and sophomores against BYU?
No, because what other young guys are going to play? I think you could see an increase in snaps from a guy like Quavaris Crouch and Roman Harrison and Jalen McCullough, but outside of those three, I mean, I don't see somebody emerging that hasn't already emerged. Elijah Simmons is stuck on the scout team. The Chris Akporoganes and the Jackson Lampleys, they aren't seeing the field anytime soon. Trust me. The freshman tight ends aren't going to be on the field anytime soon. So I don't think we'll see new names simply playing, but I think we could see an uptick in reps and snaps for certain guys, like Eric Gray. I think Eric Gray is going to be featured a ton this week. I think you could see Ramel Keaton out there to spell Callaway, Jennings, or Palmer or Brake, or if one of those three guys get hurt, I think Keaton is the first, or I'll say the second receiver to go in behind Brandon Johnson. So I could see an uptick in his playing time. Wanye and Darnell, I think they'll play around the same amount of snaps as they did last week, which was, if I remember correctly, around the 40-ish range. Mm-hmm. And then defensively, yeah, you'd like to see Roman Harrison and Quavaris Crouch out there, but you're not going to take Darrell Taylor out to put those two in. DeAndre Johnson, he had the forced fumble, but he had a bad game outside of that. And then you had Jeremy Pruitt say earlier this week, it might have been last night in his press conference, that Quavaris Crouch and Roman Harrison are coming along, but they're still not close to playing, or they still have a ways to go, but they're getting closer and closer each day. So that tells me that they're not going to see an uptick in snaps. I think the one guy I think that you could see a lot more out of is Jalen McCullough. He's second on the depth chart at safety, and Trevon Flowers had an awful game against Georgia State. He had the whole play and the mental error where he jumped the wrong gap trying to defend the run, and I believe it was Dan Ellington, or maybe it was Trey Barnett, the running back for Georgia State. He kept it and prances into the end zone with nobody touching him, and he missed tackles, he over pursued, he was in the wrong spots, and after he made that mistake, Jalen McCullough went in for him. It was late in the game. The game was already out of hand, but they did pull Flowers for McCullough at one point. So if he comes out and has a rough first quarter, I could see Jalen McCullough being plugged in there. So I say no, simply because there's not a whole lot of names ready to play right now. You're not going to see J.J. Peterson anytime soon. So like I said, I don't know what other guys would play that haven't already played. If anything, I think guys will see an increase in snaps. And my two best, well, I'll give you three names, and I've already mentioned them, but Eric Gray, Ramel Keaton, and Jalen McCullough. Those are the three young guys that I'm looking at to see their snaps increase this week.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I guess I more was, setting up a little bit of the what happens if Tennessee does lose to BYU. Are we just going to see a youth movement type of thing? But I won't go there yet. I'll save that for if it happens. Hopefully, for Tennessee's sake. Hopefully, for all of you listening, and hopefully, Ben, for us, because it'll severely. I'm just gonna be honest. It'll severely hurt our business and our traffic if Tennessee loses. It'll be fine over the weekend because people will be angry reading and angry listening stuff. But then, man, heading into this UTC game, it'll be dead, and it'll suck for Vol fans. I don't want Vol fans to have to suffer through another loss and to start this season 0-2, a season that a lot were hoping. would be a significant improvement from last year. So I definitely don't want that to happen. But I just look at this game, and there's a lot. I mean, a ton riding on this game for Tennessee. Like we said earlier, this is definitely the most important game of the season for Tennessee, and it has a lot of implications for the future of the program as well. Ben, I'm asking for your pick for the game because we'll save that obviously for our prediction piece and stuff on Friday that we're going to have out, and be sure to check it out on RockyTopInsider.com. We're going to have Ben's BYU preview piece up there here soon. We're going to have our game predictions. We're going to have a buy and sell feature up there like we did last week for the Georgia State game. I may hopefully have time to do a game preview piece up there as well. I'll have one more kind of last look back at the Georgia State game as far as, Tennessee. This isn't the first time Tennessee's lost to a non-Power 5 school. It's not the first time Tennessee's lost their home opener or the season opener. So I want to take a look back at both instances and see, how other seasons in the last, I think, 60 years as far back as I went, the last 60 years or so of Tennessee football, and seeing, how their seasons went when Tennessee started out 0-1 or when Tennessee lost to a non-Power 5 school in their season. So I wanted to do that. I hopefully we'll have time to do that on either Thursday night or on Friday morning. So be on the lookout for all of that. But Ben, like I said, I don't want to give away too much of I don't want to make a prediction or anything like that here on the podcast, but before the game plays on Saturday, it'll be a night game, and I'll be very curious to see what the fan turnout's going to be like, and it'll be the first time there's beer sales in the stadium, of Neyland Stadium. What is your gut feeling on this game? Because my gut feeling, I think all of you all listening probably know this, it's not a great one, but my gut feeling is that Tennessee is going to come out and they're going to play with more energy. They're going to play with more effort, but I still think it's a bigger issue than maybe some people realize. And I think that even if there is more effort and more fire out there, I'm not expecting Tennessee to come out and blow BYU out, or I'm not even expecting them to come out and maybe win a close game. I still think because of lack of execution on all levels of the defense, the fact the offensive line still struggling mightily, the fact the defensive line just looked pretty bad last week against a what should have been a very inferior Georgia State offensive line. They're going to be facing a much better offensive line with what BYU has. My gut feeling of this one, Ben, is that I don't expect it to get ugly. I don't expect BYU to blow them out, but I just think that it's not going to go well, and I don't think I don't think fans who are expecting to see a significant improvement from week 1 to week 2, I think their hopes are going to be let down. I hope I'm wrong. I genuinely hope I'm wrong. I don't sit here and root against Tennessee or anything like that. It doesn't bring me pleasure and joy to see Tennessee suffer or Tennessee, reach new lows or anything like they did on Saturday. But I just telling you how I feel. I think my gut feeling of this one is I don't expect Tennessee to show a whole lot of improvement from. They'll show some, but I don't think they're going to show enough to where it's going to appease Vol fans. Even if somehow Tennessee does kind of win an ugly game or whatever, I don't think the improvement on the field is going to give Tennessee fans a whole lot of hope for the SEC schedule.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in Tennessee pulling this game out. I've been surprised to see the Stuart Mandels, the Bruce Feldmans of the world, the national media members. I've been surprised to see them this week pick Tennessee to win, quite frankly. I think BYU's blowout loss last week had more to do with Utah being super good rather than BYU just playing poorly. Did they play great? Absolutely not. They kind of had the same mistakes that Tennessee had. But, again, I think that blowout loss had more to do with Utah than BYU. I think BYU on paper is a strong football team, and especially strong in the places where Tennessee is weak, in the trenches. I am a big believer that in order to win at any level in football, you have to be strong up front offensively, and you have to be strong up front defensively. You have to be able to run the football. You have to be able to stop the run. And last week, Tennessee could not run the football, could not stop the run, and their offensive line got very little push, if any, and the defensive line definitely had no push and didn't even know where to line up correctly. So on paper, I think it's a bad matchup for Tennessee. And then the whole effort thing, I'd like to think Tennessee shows up and plays with effort, but they've played 3 straight games now, Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Georgia State, in which they did not play with effort. So with the whole effort thing, I'll believe it when I see it. It'll be very sad and very disappointing if they show up and don't play with effort. And
Yeah.
you would think that it would be corrected, but again, I'm in the boat of I'll believe it when I see it.
I think you and I are in that same boat, Ben, and like I said, we don't want to sit here and sound like downers and negative Vols or whatever you want to call us in this episode. But man, it's just, I mean, we also don't want to sit here and act like it's all rainbows and sunshine over on campus, because it's not. I mean, Pruitt would tell you, he'll be the first one to tell you it's not all rainbows and sunshine, and any player will. And I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you're sitting here expecting Tennessee to go out and win 75-0, or and that's obviously being hyperbolic, but I think it's unrealistic to think Tennessee is going to look like just a different team on the field over the weekend. Maybe they do. I mean, I said it's unrealistic, but I mean, we've seen weird things like that happen before with Tennessee football, man. I've seen a lot of people saying it'd be so Tennessee if the Vols go out after this loss to Georgia State and then finish the year 9-3. I'm like, no, it wouldn't. That would not be so Tennessee. It would be so Tennessee to start the year 5-0 with wins over Georgia and Florida, and then somehow crap the bed to finish 8-4. Because that did happen, and that's been Tennessee's MO, not surprising you in a positive way. When's the last time Tennessee surprised you in a positive way for a full season? I guess maybe 2007, but even then, you had blowout losses to some rivals, and you kind of backed into the the SEC East title, and that great, you won the SEC East. I'm not complaining about that. Vol fans would take that in a heartbeat right now. They would take backing in to the conference title, the SEC championship game in a heartbeat. But I can't tell you, it's been a very long time. I guess not even 2006, because then you had injuries derailed what could have been a very good year that year, because you started out on fire against Cal, but then you didn't win the East, and Tennessee definitely had the roster in 2006 to win the East, but then you had injuries and stuff at multiple different positions kind of, make that not happen. It's been a very long time. Maybe I would maybe say 2004 would be the last time you'd say Tennessee had from start to finish, not just kind of games in a season, but from an actual full season perspective, a surprisingly good season where you went into it not expecting Tennessee to be as good as they were. I think 2004 would be the one I'd point to, because you had two freshman quarterbacks kind of splitting time to begin that year. Both get hurt, and then you turn to Rick Clausen and still, win the East and finish the year, doing all right in that season. That was I think looking back on it from my perspective of it, I was young. I was, I think, 11, I think, when that season happened. But still, I think that's the last time you point to it. It would not be so Tennessee to lose this game to Georgia State and then go 9-3. That is not Tennessee. Tennessee would be so Tennessee if they finished 2-10 this year. I'm sorry. I know I ended this on a bad note. I know I ended this on another negative note, and Ben and I have both said multiple times in this podcast we didn't want to sound that way and didn't want to come off that way, but things are just not great right now at Tennessee. And I genuinely hope Tennessee does show more improvement, and they do come out against BYU and they do beat the Cougars, and they do kind of turn the ship around and turn the season around. But we're just telling you how it is. We're telling you how we feel, and we're not feeling great about it. And like I said, though, hopefully we're wrong. Let us know your thoughts on it, whether you want to comment on Twitter. We're at Rocky Top Insider on Twitter. Or if you're listening to this through the YouTube channel, comment on there as well. Just leave a comment on the video. Like reading them. Some of y'all are kind of weird leaving some YouTube comments. And I think I thought Facebook had some of the worst comments. I think YouTube probably unseats Facebook when it comes to that. But most of y'all are great. I think most people who leave the weird comments are just kind of one-off listeners or definitely trolls. But most of you who listen to the show and are regular viewers and patrons of RTI, first of all, we very much appreciate you. But secondly, you guys are the ones leaving good comments, well thought out comments, not some weird, crazy off the wall stuff. But signing off for Ben McKee, I am Nathaniel Rutherford. We both appreciate you listening to this episode of the RTI Podcast. You can listen to us on iTunes, listen to us with an Android device. You can find us on RockyTopInsider.com and click on the podcast tab there. And like I said, you can also listen on YouTube. It's a new way to experience the podcast, and we appreciate all of you who frequent our YouTube channel. But until next time, this has been another episode of the RTI Podcast.